for years, for decades really, Iran has pursued nuclear weapons. Well, Iran has expressed a desire to eliminate the state of Israel, where the state of Iran has been a sponsor of terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and beyond. And where at least in our opinion, Canada has listed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization, active terrorist organization. These are violations of international law. These are the ones we look to. Thank you.
So that's interesting. That's Mark Carney's take. He's at the Canada-EU summit in Brussels, right, on this whole idea of international law. And because what's been called into question, I guess, is the U.S. attack on the weekend on those nuclear sites as a violation of international law. He's, of course, pointing the finger at Iran. James Mennie on this. He is, of course, from the Montreal Gazette. He's on the line. Jim, what do you make of this?
I have to tell you, there's a certain amount of surreality. Let me rephrase this. When it has to do with Donald Trump, it's always surreal. But there's an even greater level of surreality in the past 24 hours over this attack by the U.S. on Iranian nuclear installations. As we just heard in the newscast, Donald Trump is stomping his little feet because it doesn't look as if his claim that he had completely obliterated Iran's capability to produce a nuclear weapon. It doesn't look like that's in fact what happened. In fact, despite all the really PR that was put together for the Trump administration by mainstream American media, saying these blockbuster bombs are the only ones that can, apparently they didn't. And apparently, and it's not a matter of saying, well, it's your word against mine. When you blow something up that's nuclear, you have traces. There are no traces. There's no residue. So the chances are that even the fact that he was mouthing off about suggesting bombing, they probably moved all the equipment out of there anyway. But on the other hand, we've got this weird situation where the Iranians now have said, well, we fired the same number of missiles against this U.S. airbase in Qatar, I think. Yep. And you know what? We are avenged. That's it. The whole idea of closing the Straits of Hormuz, where 20% of the entire world's oil moves, that's off the table simply because right now Iran needs the money from its own oil proceeds to rebuild the country and perhaps rebuild another bomb. But while all this is going on, as far as I'm concerned, my friend, the bigger story is our prime minister signing this deal with the European Union in terms of security, in terms of defense, in terms of procurement. In other words, I mean, and like I say, I am not a cheerleader for Mark Carney, but everything this guy has said in the past month is coming to pass. It's not going to go down the road for consultations or we'll think about it. It is, in fact, happening. So if we start looking at a new business/defense relationship with the European Union in terms of procurement, in terms of supply, all of a sudden the game we've been playing with the U.S. for more than half a century gets put on its head. And I'm really wondering whether once he comes to his so-called senses, Donald Trump will slap more sanctions against this country for having dared to shake up the status quo when it came to our arms and defense agreements. We're still a member of NORAD. We're still a member of NATO. But it seems like, whereas, Aaron, Canada was going steady with the U.S., apparently now we're able to see other people.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting way to put it, Jim. I wonder, too, you heard on the news, I think that, Donald Trump is now actually upset that the media is actually questioning, right? The efficiency of these, as in, can we get an idea? Is there pictures? Is there radiation leak, as you just said? Yeah. And this is all happening. But what's even more interesting to me is where he came out on the weekend, of course, and threatened Iran, basically, saying if you attack any, we'll come back, it'll be bigger. You have that clip, right? Just this little part of it. I want to read what he said after this. Go ahead.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
A lot easier. So now, after this thing happened today with the attack in Qatar that apparently didn't injure or kill anyone, Donald Trump posting on his Truth Social, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, one was, quote, set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report no Americans were harmed. Hardly any damage was done. Here goes. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will be hopefully no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. He hates you Monday. He loves you Tuesday.
Well, we'll see. We'll also see. I don't know if he wrote that before or after his own vice president turned around and essentially contradicted him, saying we have set back their program for nuclear development by a substantial period of time. But there was no talk of obliteration. And let's face it, there was a certain pall over this entire operation, the romantically named Midnight Thunder. A lot of people pointed out, yeah, it's great. The American stealth bombers went in there after Israeli pilots spent a couple of weeks clearing away all the air defenses. So, fish in a barrel, yeah, maybe. But the fact is, he is becoming a greater embarrassment to himself than usual. And I think in this particular instance, Aaron, his own entourage are beginning to notice that you can't talk your way out of this. This is not Trump being Trump. This is Trump being an idiot on an international scale. And so when you have longtime allies with like Canada turning around and announcing unabashedly, yeah, we've made this deal on defense, on procurement, on weaponry, on hardware with the European Union, you think, well, geez, that doesn't make any, the U.S. is right next door. The Europeans are across an ocean, even over a pole. And yet here we are. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. My understanding is Trump is supposed to be there tomorrow. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what this guy is going to say, given today's developments in the Netherlands and in Iran. So it's going to be, and if he's got his hackles up already over the press coverage, you can imagine if they allow him to be exposed to European journalists who really don't work for people who work for Donald Trump, the kind of questions they're going to ask, or whether he'll simply storm out or leave because he's got more important things to do back in the U.S. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I got to tell you, the amount of fundamental change that is happening in this country and in this country's relations with the rest of the world is just staggering. And it's only been a month.
By the way, you want to take a whack at this, Jim, as to where you think this whole thing plays out? I'm talking now about Iran, Israel, U.S. How does this end? In talks?
The best person to answer that question is Benjamin Netanyahu. He's calling the shots here. But I would say that he realizes that, they'll keep playing whack-a-mole with the fixins. I remember, Aaron, you were probably serving food at that, wherever you were. You were probably doing your summer job. And I was reading about I think it was Israeli fighters blowing up, nuclear reactors or whatever. I mean, this is an old game for the Israelis. They know how it's played and they know how it's done. And quite frankly, they are, and I love this expression, compared to the Americans, the Israelis are old in war. They know exactly what they are doing. They know exactly what their objectives are. I think the idea of not only sort of like even postponing the nuclear effort on the part of Iran, but shaking the regime. Because let's face it, and this is a theme that's gone through all the raids thus far in the past 2 weeks. Our war is not with the Iranian people; it's with the government. It's with this regime, and we know there have been attempts at revolution in the past. This, I think, is the end game that Netanyahu would like to see, and I think a lot of the world would like to see. Donald Trump, I think he wants to see things go boom and have people turn around and cheer for him. But I think it's a little more complicated than that.
I heard someone today talking about this. I think it was an interview Vashi did, saying, imagine, this idea for regime change in Iran. So what happens? Some people who, of course, have spoken out against the government are either dead or have been exiled or choose to live in exile. Is there enough there that they can come back and topple this government? It seems unlikely. And failing that, if it's going to be a military coup, you're talking now about chaos. Where's the win? Yeah. Where's the win here?
Yeah, and I remember not that long ago, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, there was what seemed to be a really burgeoning attempt on, and I think they called themselves the Greens. There was a revolutionary party in Iran taking to the streets. There were nationwide demonstrations, and the West hung them out to dry. So I think, the Iranians aren't stupid. They would love to be shed of this government, but they also know they are on their own. At the first sign of trouble, the people who are talking with the biggest mouth will be the first ones to hide under the biggest rock.
Jim, it's a very strange transition to go into our next subject, so I'm not sure we should be doing it here. You want to go ahead and talk?
Okay, no, we can save it.
Okay,
Tomorrow's another day.
let's
And
do it tomorrow.
I'll even tell you about my first summer job.
You want to tell me now?
No, I want to tell you
Okay,
tomorrow, because
okay.
tomorrow's another day, as I said.
Very well then, Jim. It wasn't at Expo 67, was it?
No, but you know what?
okay.
And I'm sure you had the same thing. I'm sure a lot of our listeners. When I had my first job, I literally had a pay packet. I got cash in a brown envelope with the deductions written in pen on the outside.
God, I remember that.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? All right.
How's that for a tease?
We do that tomorrow. All right. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Demand.